A 44-year-old woman who immigrated to the United States from Vietnam with her family in tow so that she could provide a better life for her children, who was left alone to be a single mother after her husband died of liver cancer 7 years prior, has now been left paralyzed over a mere $4,300. This is the story of Nhung Truong. Nhung Truong was born in 1979 in Vietnam, and she immigrated to the United States with her family and ended up in Houston, Texas. And when her husband passed away tragically in 2016 of liver cancer, she was now a single mother. And oftentimes, families, when they do immigrate from other countries, specifically Asia, and especially if they have children or a single mother, oftentimes a grandparent, if not a grandmother, travels with them. And Nhung Truong, who was now the only sole provider for her family, was working as a nail salon technician, and her mother was able to stay at home so that she can watch the kids. Because oftentimes when people immigrate to America, they essentially have to start over career-wise. And for immigrants who are working and may not have a lucrative career, that parent, that grandparent that comes with them essentially is an in-house babysitter, someone who's able to watch over the children so that that parent who's not making ludicrous amounts of money doesn't have to spend money on childcare. And this is something that is very commonplace for a lot of immigrants. My mother as well, who also was a single mother, had her mother, my grandmother, live with us because when my mother was at work, even as young as 6, 7 years old, my grandmother was there to watch me after school until my mother came home late in the evenings. And Nhung Truong, her 3 children, and her mother lived like this in Houston, Texas for about 7 years after their father had passed away. And for Nhung Truong and her family, none of them had been able to go back and visit the rest of their family and their friends in Vietnam since Nhung Truong's husband had passed away in 2016. Which meant that Nhung Truong had to work hard not only to just provide for the daily livings of her family of 5 in Houston, but she was also saving up a little bit of money every year to try to save up enough cash so that she could take her family back to Vietnam to visit the rest of their family and friends. And on the day before Valentine's Day, on February 13th, 2023, Nhung Truong finally had saved up $4,300. So roughly around 11 o'clock in the morning that day, Nhung Truong made her way to the Bank of America that she frequents on Black Hawk Boulevard in Southeast Houston. And then after withdrawing the $4,300 from her account, she got back into her car and traveled 28 miles to the Dun Huang Plaza shopping center located on Bel Air Boulevard just within Belt 8 in Western Houston. The Dun Huang Plaza is located in a neighborhood of Houston that has a very high Asian population. I mean, just right across the street is another shopping center full of more Asian stores. So just across the street from each other are these 2 huge shopping centers. And the reason why Nhung Truong traveled 28 miles from her bank to the Dun Huang Shopping Center is to go to a travel agency that's located within there. And for many people, they're probably wondering, why did she even go to a travel agency? In 2023, who even uses a travel agency anymore? The majority of us purchase our plane tickets online, either directly through the airline or through an aggregate website like kayak.com or Travelocity. However, but even for people who may be technologically savvy, trying to purchase airline tickets online is a headache. I mean, you're literally playing games with these airlines. I mean, if you look up a specific airline and then it catches it on your cookies, if you try to look up the same airline multiple times, they'll increase your price. If you look on a Tuesday morning versus a Thursday afternoon, the prices may be double. Sometimes the prices change within a day because it went from more than 2 weeks notice before your travel date to just under 2 weeks for your travel date. So there's a lot of unknowns just for everyone else, but especially for immigrants who may not be very technologically savvy. Travel agencies are very black and white. You get what you pay for. You ask them, you look for dates that they're traveling on, and they try to give you the best deals. Oftentimes travel agencies, because they're buying tickets in bulk or because they're buying it in wholesale, they're able to give you a little bit of discounts, even though it may be about the same, if not a little bit more than the ticket prices that you purchase online. So Nyung Truong arrives at Dunhuang Plaza roughly around 11:30 in the morning, and the travel agency that she's going to is on the second floor. And the shopping center is an outdoor shopping center, which means that it's not an inside shopping mall. All of the areas where you walk to get to each store and the entrance to each business is on the outside. So Nyung Truong parks her car in the parking lot and she starts walking towards the stairs so she can get to the second floor to get to the travel agency. And she's walking on the pathway right in front of another store, a herb and acupuncture store. And she's walking towards the stairs and she gets to roughly about 10 to 15 before she gets to the actual stairway. And she sees another man walking towards her, a young man who's wearing a red, white, and black Air Jordan hoodie. And she doesn't suspect him in the least. In fact, as he starts getting closer to her, she doesn't try to dodge out of his way or she doesn't act suspicious. She literally walks within maybe like a couple of feet of this gentleman, and she's walking with her purse, possibly a clutch or even just a big wallet in her left hand. And right when she's about 10 feet away from the bottom of the stairs, the man in the red, white, and black Air Jordan hoodie with his right hand tries to grab her purse, at which point Nyung Truong turns left trying to avoid him, and the man then uses his left hand to reach around her to try to grab the purse out of her hand, while Nyung Truong is trying to spin and juke away from him. So the man uses his two arms, grabs around her, and decides to try to pick her up, but they're right up against the glass of the business that's right there. And she's able to keep her right foot planted on the ground, and he's only able to lift her up so that her left leg rises up. And it was at the moment that her left leg gets lifted up off the ground that she loses control of her purse. And there's surveillance footage that catches this whole interaction. And it's at that moment that you see her purse leave her hand and starts falling to the ground. And while the purse is mid-air, and you see a bunch of the contents that's within her wallet or purse start falling to the ground, including a white envelope and a couple of passports. So the man drops Nyung Truong and immediately grabs her purse, turns around, and starts running in the opposite direction. And while Nyung Truong is about to fall on her butt, she immediately realizes what's happening, notices that the man grabbed her purse and not the white envelope that actually contained the cash. And she grabs that envelope immediately as she's still falling. And the man who's running away with her purse, for some reason, at that exact moment, must have realized that he doesn't have the cash, because I'm assuming that purse felt pretty empty, and he turns around and watches her grab the envelope. And he immediately swings back around and heads back towards her. And it's at this moment that Nyung Truong, who just made contact with her bottom to the ground and had just grabbed the white envelope, starts to get up and starts turning around to run in the other direction. And at this point, the man had already returned back to her and is within inches of her and reaches back out with his right arm to grab that white envelope from her. And Nyung Truong tries to run away and he goes along with her. They take maybe a step or two before the man goes around, reaches with his left arm again to try to wrestle the envelope away from her, and decides that he's going to pick her up again. And maybe it's because she wasn't expecting it. She had just fallen. She's a little disoriented, or maybe she wasn't close enough to that wall that she was able to anchor herself down with. But either way, this time the man successfully picks her up to the point where both her feet go multiple feet up into the air, and then he slams her to the ground on the left side, just behind this pillar that's blocking the view from the surveillance video. But you can see the lower half of Nyung Truong laying there motionless, and at this moment, the man reaches down, re-grabs the wallet, the purse that he originally took, along with that white envelope, turns back around and books it off the screen. And other surveillance footage in the shopping center catches him run into a passenger seat of a vehicle, and the car drives off. Nyung Truong is immediately taken to the nearest hospital, where police realize that she has broken ribs and a fractured spine. A fractured spine that has now left her paralyzed from the waist down. We're talking about full-on paralysis, where even at the hospital, they had to use a motorized crane to be able to lift her up off of her bed and put her into a wheelchair so that she can be moved around outside of her bed. And the doctors tell Nhung Truong that she only has a 50% chance that she will ever walk again, if at all, and that her recovery will take at least 2 years, if not more. And we're not talking about a full recovery where she goes from being paralyzed to being able to walk. We're talking about the type of recovery where she's no longer in constant pain, having to take pain medication and having to go to physical therapy multiple times a week. We're talking about a recovery where she's able to return to her normal life, regardless of if she's able to walk or not. And in the 2 months following Nhung Truong's attack, there is zero movement on her case by the police. I mean, we're talking about in the city of Houston, in the last couple of years, there are over 260,000 cases that have not been prosecuted because of a lack of government employees that are able to move those cases along. And it isn't until Nhung Truong's story goes viral that all of a sudden the Houston Police Department has some traction on her case. You see, because the other surveillance footage in the shopping center was there, they were able to capture not only the vehicle that the man got into, but they were able to get a clear capture of the license plate of that vehicle as well. And it's honestly pure coincidence and luck that they even got any movement at all. You see, roughly right around that time, police made a regular traffic stop and realized as they were running the woman's plates, when the police realized that this car is a vehicle of interest in Nhung Truong's jugging. And for those of you that are not aware, jugging is a pretty recent terminology that the police came up with that specifically talks about crimes where the criminal watches people either at the bank or an ATM and then follows them to a second location to then rob them of their valuables or their cash. And after taking the driver of that vehicle into custody, the woman ended up being a 19-year-old woman by the name of Zy'nika Woods. And Zy'nika Woods, after being confronted about the jugging of Nhung Truong, gave up the man who paralyzed her. 17-year-old Joseph Harrell, who, by the way, 12 days after he had paralyzed Nhung Truong, robbed another woman and assaulted her with a gun. And this woman who had her purse stolen by Joseph Harrell as well, like Nhung Truong, realized that she had her AirPods inside of her purse. So she and her husband decided to use Find My Phone and tracked her AirPods all the way back to Joseph Harrell's house. So after realizing that he had gone into his home with her purse, she and her husband actually parked a couple of blocks away and called 911, except while they were waiting for the police to arrive, guess who decided to knock on their car window? That's right, Joseph Harrell. He knocks on the window and speaks to this woman's husband, and Joseph Harrell asks her husband if he needs anything. And when the husband declines and rolls back up his window, Joseph Harrell continues to walk towards the front of their car, and he pretends like he's walking away. And when he gets in front of their car, he turns around and pulls out a gun on them. So Joseph Harrell was actually in custody of the cops because of the second incident. And it wasn't until Zy'nika Woods ratted him out that the cops were like, oh, it seems we've also been looking for you for another case. And that's what I mean when I say that it's purely luck that the police caught Joseph Harrell at all. Pure luck that they pulled over Zy'nika Woods for a random and regular traffic violation, and pure luck that they happened to have Joseph Harrell in their custody. Well, actually, I guess technically also partially because of Joseph Harrell's negligence and greedy behavior. And at this point, because Nhung Truong's story has gone completely viral, the community has started to really rally around her and her family. Her daughter set up a GoFundMe to help with all of the expenses of the hospital bills, the surgery, the physical rehabilitation, and the fact that because Nhung Truong was the only person who was eligible to work, she was the sole breadwinner of the family, which meant that all of their daily expenses, the rent, the bills, the food was also needing to be paid for. And at this point, her GoFundMe had reached about $70,000, which we all know that here inside of the United States, That barely covers anything when you go to the hospital, let alone everything that Nhung Truong needed for the months that she was hospitalized. But at this point, some of the community members really began to offer their help. Chef Lena Trang of Lena's Asian Kitchen in Houston offered to cook every meal for the family for as long as they needed. And Julio Garcia and his wife, who own Ambrizo's Social Mexican Kitchen in Houston, offered to pay Nhung Truong's rent for up to a full year. And while the community was rallying behind Nhung Truong, Joseph Harrell was sitting in prison calling his friends. And for those of you that may not know, every single phone call that is made going out of the prison or coming into the prison is recorded and monitored. And it seems that this isn't a well-known fact amongst most people, and especially criminals, because a lot of criminals actually accidentally, without knowing this fact, give themselves away and give the prosecution the evidence that they need, because a lot of times they accidentally give a full confession. And that's exactly what Joseph Harrell did. Joseph Harrell had actually asked multiple of his friends to log onto his Instagram and delete any evidence of the jugging or crimes, including on the same day that he robbed and paralyzed Nhung Truong, he posted a photo of himself wearing the exact same black, white, and red Air Jordan hoodie that he was caught on surveillance footage while assaulting and robbing Nhung Truong. And in addition to those requests, there was a phone call that was recorded and released to the public of Joseph Harrell's confession, essentially. And I'm going to play that recording for you right now.
He was snatching purses. I got snatched the purse. Basically, when I snatched the purse, the lady ran with the money. I grabbed her, slammed her, and she was paralyzed. I ain't going for it. But I already hit up $230,000 off GoFundMe. Instead of run on with her life, like, you just ran up $230,000. Look, they say she ran up $230,000 and she'll be back walking in no less than a year.
And for those of you who had a bit of a hard time understanding what he was saying because of the quality of the recording, he says already at $230,000 her GoFundMe. I ruined her life like shit. You already done ran up $230,000. Look, they say she ran up $230,000 and she will be back walking in no later than a year. And outside of that recording, he also tells his friends that there's no way that he accepts any offer where he goes to jail and thinks that he should only get probation. You see, Joseph Harrell thought that because Nhung Truong made $230,000 and that she may be able to walk again in the near future, that he thinks that his crime is null and void. In his mind, he's thinking to himself, I stole $4,300. She just made $230,000. Wow. She just made all of this profit, not thinking about the fact that that $230,000, I guarantee you, does not even cover a portion of her medical bills. And this part of the story, as infuriating as it already is probably going to make your blood boil even worse. Because after this recording is released to the public, and after that recording goes absolutely viral, the judge presiding over Joseph Harrell's case decided to cut his $200,000 bond that he would need to pay to get out of jail to be free again up until his court date in half to $100,000, even though before any of this had even happened, he had already been released on bond for a weapons charge. I mean, even the president of the Houston Police Department's union was so shocked that he stated, and I quote, if he gets out of jail, he is going to victimize more individuals. He does not care about anyone but himself. And for the judge to lower his bond baffles my mind. I can't wrap my head around it. This kid is a danger to others and the community, and he needs to be locked up. And he's absolutely right. I mean, from a pattern of behavior standpoint, just the physical things that he's done, he was already arrested for a weapons charge and then was already released on bond. So he was already in prison and released on bond until his court date. And while waiting for his court date, he commits a jugging of Nhung Truong and paralyzes her, by the way, because he assaults her multiple times, and also decides to assault and mug another woman as well. So just from a pattern of behavior standpoint, he has shown that he does not care. He's only out for money. He doesn't care who he has to hurt to do it. So that's just from his actual behavior. On top of the fact that on the recorded phone calls, he shows absolutely no remorse. I mean, like, whatever is the complete opposite of remorse, he's doing that. He thinks that he's entitled, he's privileged, he shouldn't have to answer for his actions because apparently the fact that she's alive and that she may recover means that it just deletes what he did. And the pattern of behavior, along with the proof of his attitude, this clear, obvious attitude of I don't give a shit, equals that there is an extremely high possibility that he's going to keep doing it because, again, he keeps proving with his actions and his words and his attitude that he doesn't think he even did anything wrong, which is a stark contrast from 19-year-old Zy'nika Woods, who was the getaway driver, who also had her phone call in prison released to the public as well. And her phone call wasn't released in a recording. Her phone call was released in a transcript. And in this phone call with her mother, and on the complete other end of the spectrum as Joseph Harrell, his accomplice, 19-year-old Zy'nika Woods, who was the getaway driver, also had a phone call that she had in prison released. Except this one wasn't an audio recording, it was a transcript, and this phone call was with Zy'nika and her mother. And almost immediately off the bat, Zy'nika starts off the conversation with her mother by stating, and I quote, "It's a lot, mama. I did something bad. I had did something bad. We hit on someone, mama. We hit on someone." And you could almost tell by the words that she uses that she has remorse. She feels guilty and bad for what she did. And it most likely is because of the way that her mom raised her not to be. Because Zy'nika goes on to state by telling her mother that she's not understanding why, that she's also being charged with aggravated battery, even though she stayed in the car, had no interaction with Nhung Truong whatsoever, and did not lay a single finger on her. In fact, the exact words she says to her mother is, and I quote, "Paralyzed has nothing to do with me." At which point her mother responds to her by telling her, "Well, no, if you accessory, you with it too. If somebody go out there and rob a bank and I'm just in the car and I drive, I'm with it too, because I didn't have to go with them. You get it now?" And Zy'nika responded back with a single, "Yeah." 19-year-old getaway driver Zy'nika Woods was charged with one count of aggravated robbery causing serious bodily injury, but she accepted a plea bargain and pled guilty to a downgraded charge of robbery causing serious bodily injury. But the stipulation was that she had to testify against her co-defendant, Joseph Harrell. And she was sentenced to 10 years of probation with a deferred adjudication, which means that if she successfully completes her decade-long probation without getting into legal trouble ever again during that time, she will not receive an actual conviction on her record, which means that this incident will not be on her record moving forward. And Joseph Harrell, who was looking at life in prison if he was found guilty during a jury trial, also accepted a plea bargain where he pled guilty to one count of aggravated robbery causing serious bodily injury and was sentenced to 30 years in prison, but he will also be eligible for parole after a mere 15 years served. But he is also ineligible to make any appeals on his sentencing. Nhung Truong, who lived in fear, thinking that her assailant was going to find her and finish the job, was finally relieved when Joseph Harrell was caught and sentenced to prison. But Nhung Truong does not have any ill will towards Joseph Harrell. In fact, she hopes that Joseph is able to rehabilitate himself in prison and come out a better man.
That's crazy because I don't think he will be. He's justified it in his head that he probably even helped her out because he doesn't understand the cost of everything, and he just sees the number that she received through the GoFundMe.
Initially, I do believe that he thought that he probably did her, quote unquote, a solid by making her richer than she was before. But even 15 years is a long time. Is it long enough for the crime that he committed? Because whether or not she's able to walk again, she may be paralyzed for the rest of her life. And even if she is able to walk again, it's going to take so much effort and so much time that she could have been spending working and building a life for her kids. That's just all completely taken away from her. But even then, 15 years really is a long time for a person to grow. And if we remember, he was 17 years old when this happened. He was essentially still a minor. And at the end of those 15 years, he's going to be about 32 years old. And hopefully, there is some growth, because even though we close our eyes and in the blink of an eye, 15 years can go by, when you're locked up in prison, those 15 years drag on forever, because for the majority of us, life seems to happen in a flash because there's just so much going on. We have to wake up, we do all this cooking, cleaning, taking care of ourselves, our family, work, and all of these things that take up a lot of time. But in prison, he's literally just staring at four walls for the majority of his time. You're really just left there with your own thoughts, and a lot of things can happen. He can spend his time saying very entitled and thinking that he's delusionally didn't do anything wrong. But even to be released on parole, you have to go in front of a committee of people and actually sell them that you've totally changed and that you have all of this remorse. And I doubt that he's going to get approved at his first try, because the majority of people don't. Which means that even as you're faking all this remorse, there has to be thoughts that go through your head that go, well, yeah, I mean, I did mess up. I did screw up her life. If you're going to be lying to this panel of people saying that, oh man, I screwed up her life is never going to be the same. Even if she's able to walk, look, she needs to use a cane. She's not going to have full mobility. She still has pain every day. You can't fake those things without humanely feeling it to some degree. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's not the case with every single other human. But there is a chance that there is some growth. Whether or not he does that is up to Joseph Harrell. But 15 years is a long time to be spending with your own thoughts. Nhung Truong, on the other hand, was finally able to take her family to Vietnam, even though she's confined completely to a wheelchair and is completely paralyzed below her waist. But she was still able to take her family while she still has her health to be able to go see her family and friends, and take her family to see her family and friends, because her children, who are 13, 15, and 20 years old, were merely 6, 8, and 13 years old the last time they saw any of their family in Vietnam. And even as recently as October 2023, she was still having to wear a diaper on top of sitting on pee pads, because that is now her everyday life. But she is working hard at physical therapy regularly, multiple times a week, working hard, hoping that she regains some mobility in her bottom half. And we know for a fact that that $235,000 plus that has been raised through her GoFundMe is probably completely depleted, because her insurance actually refuses to pay for her physical therapy, which means that it has to come out of pocket. And just recently, within the last week and a half, Nhung Truong, through her lawyer, filed a civil lawsuit against Dun Huang Plaza for failing to keep its patrons safe on their premises. Her lawyer stated that between January 16th, 2021 and January 28th, 2024, police received 419 calls of service to Dun Huang Plaza, including reckless discharge of a firearm, aggravated assault, sexual assault, robbery, aggravated robbery, unlawfully carrying a weapon, criminal trespass, and criminal mischief and graffiti, which means that at 52 weeks per year for 3 years, that averages out to be about 2.5 criminal cases a week. The lawsuit is seeking to have Dunhuang Plaza deemed a public nuisance and ordered to have more security. During a press conference, Nhung Truong stated, and I quote, "Life has been extremely difficult, especially since my husband passed away, leaving me in a short period of shock and grief, as well as the responsibility to take care of my children who were deeply saddened. I've struggled through that phase. Life slowly became stable, and I was a strong and healthy person, a joy and the foundation for my children. It appears time stood still and that all good things would come, but life's hardships came one after another, and I couldn't prevent the robbery that stripped away all my savings. Not only did it affect me financially, but I also have not recovered from the emotional impact. Every day is filled with agony and fear about the future's insecurity and instability. From being a healthy, active person, now I feel worn out, fatigued by work, and I've become a shattered individual due to numerous calamities and life's uncertainties that have crushed my spirit. I am truly in deep pain and completely exhausted on the brink of breaking down. If only I had been protected during the robbery, maybe I wouldn't have ended up as harmed as I am today. I thought buying tickets during the day was a safe and simple activity, but I never expected that when the robbery happened that there wouldn't be anyone to protect or help me. I really lost faith in life. I hope that after some miracle, I will be able to find peace again to stand on my own 2 feet so that I can take my children to play, to school as before. The compassion and support from everyone have made my life's burdens a bit lighter. I'm very grateful to everyone. From what happened to me, I want everyone to be vigilant and careful whenever you go out to avoid unfortunate incidences like mine." In response, the representatives for Dunhuang Plaza stated that because this was a targeted attack, that they couldn't have enough security to have stopped this incident because they stated, and I quote, "In cases of targeted robbery like this, the incident can happen so quickly that security guards may not be immediately available on the scene. However, upon notification, we promptly reported the incidents to Houston Police Department and provided surveillance video footage, which greatly aided in the apprehension of the robbers. The government needs to work on community safety. In the past few years, the city of Houston has had over 260,000 cases that were not prosecuted due to a lack of employees. We definitely need a change for this, as without community protection, no area is truly safe." And while I do personally agree with Dunhuang's statement a little bit in the fact that sometimes, no matter how many security measures you have in place, people can find workarounds, look for moments in time when there is a lapse of people to be able to do these targeted attacks. However, in this specific case shown on surveillance footage, even though this happened within a matter of like a couple of minutes, it was so dead in that part of the shopping center that no one else was around to even be a bystander, let alone jump in to help, which seems that Nhung Truong's representatives are also mostly correct, because there should be more security measures put into place where the security officers are able to help people in need at an instance. Because if there were security cameras that caught this footage, that means that there should have been someone there watching the security footage, which means that if someone was there watching the security footage, they should have protocols put into place that are able to dispatch people closer to the incident than where the person watching the TV monitors are. Which means that because nobody was able to get there during the time of the jugging or the getting away, there wasn't enough personnel to be able to actually keep people safe. And the fact that there were over 419 reports in that shopping center within the course of 3 years, yeah, that means that it's being targeted there. because criminals are realizing that there are lots of opportunities for them to get away with crimes without anyone seeing or stopping them. Which means that, yes, while we can't have everything completely tight to the point where we're not open to vulnerabilities, it seems that Dunhuang Plaza had way too many vulnerabilities, therefore creating way too many opportunities for crime to happen. Because what happened to Nhung Truong should never happen to anyone else. Because we can tell each other to keep our heads on a swivel and be vigilant, especially when we have valuables on us, until our faces turn blue. But the thing about it is that there are always moments when criminals are able to take opportunities. And Nhung Truong's story shows us that no matter how many precautions you take going about in broad daylight in the middle of the day, trying to be as safe as possible, hiding the cash, that anyone can fall victim to such a crime. Because it is a real shame that there are a lot of bad people out there who are willing to take advantage of other people and put their lives at risk for just a mere couple of $1,000s, or most oftentimes way less than that. And we just need to make sure that we're looking out for ourselves and each other. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me on another episode of Patterns of Behavior, where we focus on the people behind the crime. My name is Ed Choi, and you can find me online at Etch-a-Sketch on all of the social media. If you would like to help me keep this podcast sustainable, please think about joining the Patreon. Otherwise, if you're listening to this podcast, also know that there are video versions available on Spotify and on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell for any new episodes. Otherwise, please stay safe, and I will catch you on the next one.